Imagine you're part of the most advanced galactic civilization ever known. Your species has conquered entire star systems, enslaved countless worlds, and built an empire that spans half the galaxy. You've wiped out dozens of species without breaking a sweat. Your technology is so advanced that you consider yourself gods among insects. Then one day, you encounter a small blue planet inhabited by primitive bipeds who have barely figured out how to leave their own atmosphere. They have no advanced shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light communication. They're so backward that they still fight wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. So naturally, you decide to add them to your collection of slave species. After all, what could possibly go wrong? You're about to find out why every extinct civilization in this galaxy tried to warn the universe about one simple rule. Never, ever mess with the humans. This is the story of how the mighty empire learned that lesson the hard way. This is the story of humanity's first galactic war. And this is the story of why the phrase, human warfare, became the most terrifying combination of words in any known language. Welcome to the beginning of the end, for anyone foolish enough to threaten Earth. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching the small blue planet rotate slowly on the main display. His 4 yellow eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he studied the primitive world before him. Another easy conquest to add to the Empire's ever-growing collection. The bridge was silent except for the soft hum of the ship's massive engines. Around him, his crew of elite warriors waited for his orders. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scaled purple skin gleaming under the ship's lights. Their razor-sharp claws tapped impatiently against their weapons as they anticipated another simple subjugation. "Report," commanded, his voice echoing through the bridge with the authority of someone who had conquered 37 star systems. Sub-Admiral stepped forward, his scales shimmering as he bowed. "Lord Admiral, our scans confirm this species is even more primitive than initially calculated. They call themselves humans and their planet Earth. They've only achieved basic within their own solar system. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no faster-than-light capability." Mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. Fascinating, and their population. Approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across multiple continents. They appear to be divided into numerous small nations that frequently engage in warfare among themselves. Their weapons are laughably primitive, chemical explosives, metal projectiles, and basic nuclear devices. Another officer, Commander Al, pulled up a holographic display showing images captured by their scout ships. They've been broadcasting electromagnetic signals into space for barely 100 of their years. Our analysis suggests they're completely unaware of galactic civilization. Studied the images with interest. The humans were indeed primitive-looking creatures, bipedal, soft-skinned with no natural armor or claws. They appeared weak and fragile compared to the mighty. Their cities, while numerous, seemed to be built primarily of metal and stone rather than the energy-forged materials common to advanced civilizations. "Perfect," mused. "Another species ripe for enslavement. Their large population will make excellent workers in our mining operations. Have our determined their suitability for forced labor." Consulted his. "Indeed, Lord Admiral, their physiology suggests they can survive in various environmental conditions. They show remarkable adaptability and appear to reproduce quickly. Our projections indicate they would make ideal slaves for our expansion into the Outer Rim territories." Nodded approvingly. The Empire had built its vast dominion on the backs of enslaved species. Each conquered world provided new workers, resources, and strategic advantages. The Empire now controlled over 1,500 star systems, and its military might was unquestioned throughout known space. "What of their military capabilities?" asked, though he expected the answer would be irrelevant. Commander Al brought up tactical displays showing human military installations. "Pathetic, Lord Admiral. They possess no orbital defenses, no energy weapons, and no unified planetary command structure. Their largest military forces are still bound by their planet's gravity well. We've identified several hundred nuclear weapons in their arsenals, but these represent no threat to our ship's defensive capabilities." The Admiral studied the data with growing amusement. In his 3 centuries of service to the Empire, he had overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds. Some had put up fierce resistance. The crystalline beings of Nexus VII had fought for nearly a decade before finally submitting. The hive minds of the system had coordinated brilliant defensive strategies that had actually impressed him. But this was different. These humans appeared to have no understanding whatsoever of what was coming their way. "Show me their response to our presence," ordered. Manipulated the display to show intercepted human communications. "They've detected our fleet, Lord Admiral, but their primitive sensors can only track our largest vessels. Their governments appear to be in chaos. Some are attempting to coordinate defensive measures while others are trying to establish communication." On the screen, translations of human broadcast appeared. "Unknown vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The message repeated in several human languages, each one more desperate than the last. His mandibles clicked again. How charmingly naive, they still believed this might be a peaceful contact. He turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to their planet. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The communications array activated, sending a powerful signal toward Earth that would override every broadcasting system on the planet simultaneously. Straightened to his full imposing height as the transmission began. "Primitive beings of Earth," his voice boomed across space, automatically translated into the dominant human languages. "I am Admiral of the Empire. Your species has been selected for integration into our galactic domain. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary casualties." He paused, allowing the translation systems to process his words across the planet below. "You have 72 of your planetary rotations to surrender unconditionally. Disarm your military forces, prepare your populations for relocation, and await our collection vessels. Compliance will ensure your survival as a useful species. Defiance will result in your extinction." The transmission ended, and the bridge fell silent as they waited for the human response. Expected the usual pattern: panic, desperation, and ultimately surrender. It was how things always went with primitive species. But as the hours passed, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of submission, the electromagnetic chatter from Earth increased dramatically. Rather than preparing for surrender, the humans seemed to be organizing. Looked puzzled as he monitored their communications. "Lord Admiral, their response is unusual. Instead of capitulating, they appear to be mobilizing their entire planetary infrastructure. Military production has increased by 300% in just 12 hours. "Impossible," replied. "Show me." The display revealed a flurry of activity across Earth's surface. Factories that had been producing civilian goods were rapidly converting to military production. Ancient stockpiles of weapons were being distributed to civilian populations. Most peculiar of all, their various nations, which had been enemies just days before, were now coordinating their efforts with remarkable efficiency. Commander Al studied the tactical data with growing confusion. "Their behavior doesn't match any of our predictive models, Lord Admiral. According to our psychological profiles, primitive species should be surrendering within the first 24 hours after receiving an overwhelming ultimatum." Frowned, his yellow eyes narrowing. "Perhaps they simply don't understand the magnitude of their situation. Show them our power." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their moon. Fire one plasma torpedo, just enough to vaporize a small crater. Let them see what we're capable of." The massive ship's primary weapon system charged with a low hum that resonated through the hull. A brilliant blue-white energy torpedo launched from the ship's forward array, streaking across space toward Earth's natural satellite. It struck the lunar surface with devastating force, instantly vaporizing several cubic kilometers of rock and creating a new crater visible even to the naked eye from Earth. "That should clarify things for them," said with satisfaction. But instead of the expected panic and surrender, Earth's response grew even more defiant. Within hours, every major human leader was broadcasting messages of resistance. Their words, translated by computers, filled the bridge with an alien concept the Admiral had never encountered before. "We will not submit," declared one human leader. "We will not go quietly into the night. We will fight them on the beaches, in the cities, in space, and wherever else they dare to show their faces." Another human, apparently a military commander, was even more direct. "You want to enslave humanity? Come and take us." Stared at the display in disbelief. In 3 centuries of conquest, he had never encountered such irrational defiance from such a primitive species. The humans had just witnessed the casual destruction of part of their own moon, a demonstration that their entire planet could be similarly obliterated, and yet they were choosing to fight. He said slowly, "Run a full psychological analysis of this species. Something about their behavior patterns doesn't conform to our understanding." As his subordinate began working, continued to monitor Earth's activities. What he saw all logic. The humans weren't just refusing to surrender. They were preparing for war with an intensity and coordination that seemed impossible for such a primitive civilization. Their space-based assets, limited as they were, had been rapidly weaponized. Satellites were being equipped with kinetic projectiles. Their space stations were being converted into military platforms. Most incredibly, they were attempting to launch additional assets into orbit using every available rocket, even those that hadn't been designed for military purposes. "Analysis complete, Lord Admiral," reported, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that was unusual for the typically confident officer. "The results are disturbing." "Explain." "This species appears to have evolved under conditions of constant warfare, Lord Admiral. Their entire history is marked by continuous conflict, not just with other species, but among themselves. They've been fighting wars for their entire recorded civilization." His eyes widened slightly. "Continuous warfare for how long?" "According to our data, they've had peace across their entire planet for fewer than 100 days in the past 5,000 years. They've developed an entire philosophy around warfare that they call military doctrine. They study war the way we study physics or engineering." The Admiral felt a small chill run down his spine, though he quickly dismissed it. "Irrelevant. They're still primitive. Their weapons can't penetrate our shields." But even as he spoke, he noticed something else strange happening on the displays. The humans weren't just mobilizing their existing weapons. They were innovating at a pace that seemed impossible. Commander Al pointed to several locations on Earth's surface. "Lord Admiral, they're constructing some kind of magnetic acceleration system here, here, and here. Our computers can't determine its purpose, but the energy signatures suggest it's designed to launch large masses at extremely high velocities." Said after consulting his database. "Primitive kinetic weapons that use electromagnetic force to propel projectiles, theoretically capable of achieving significant velocities, but the power requirements should be prohibitive for their technology level." Studied the construction sites with growing unease. The humans were building these weapons with incredible speed, working around the clock with a dedication that bordered on fanatical. Entire cities were being converted into manufacturing centers. Their entire species seemed to be mobilizing for war with a single-minded determination he had never witnessed. "How long until these weapons are operational?" he asked. "Unknown, Lord Admiral, but at their current construction pace, perhaps 30 of their days." Made a decision. "We're not waiting. Launch the invasion now. Crush this resistance before they can complete whatever they're building." As his orders rang out across the bridge, the massive fleet began moving toward Earth. 1,000 warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities, descended toward the small blue planet like a swarm of mechanical death. But Admiral couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In all his years of conquest, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, those instincts were telling him that these humans were unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. He had no way of knowing that he was right, and that he had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. General Sarah Martinez stood in the underground command center beneath the Pentagon, watching displays that showed the impossible. 1,000 alien warships were descending toward Earth in perfect formation, each one larger than anything humanity had ever put into space. The air in the bunker was thick with tension as military leaders from every major nation worked frantically at their stations. "Status report," she demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Colonel James Harrison looked up from his tactical display, sweat beading on his forehead despite the bunker's air conditioning. "The alien fleet has broken into 5 groups, General. They're targeting major population centers: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, and Tokyo. Estimated time to orbital bombardment range is 6 hours. Martinez nodded grimly. She had been preparing for this moment ever since the aliens' ultimatum 3 days ago. While politicians had debated and panicked, the military had done what it did best: prepare for war. "What's our defensive posture?" Admiral Wei, representing the combined Asian defense forces, pulled up a global map dotted with military installations. All available assets are moving to defensive positions. Our nuclear submarines have taken position in deep ocean trenches. The hastily constructed installations are 70% complete. We're rushing the final 3 online now. And our space-based assets? Everything we could launch is up there, replied Group Captain Williams of the RAF. 18 armed satellites, 4 weaponized space stations, and 12 emergency launch platforms equipped with nuclear warheads. It's not much against 1,000 ships, but it's what we have. Martinez studied the tactical situation with the calm that had earned her 4 stars and the respect of soldiers on 6 continents. The odds were impossible. But then again, humans had been facing impossible odds for and somehow finding ways to survive. Have we received any response to our communication attempts? Dr. Elizabeth Park, the chief linguist who had been trying to establish dialogue with the aliens, shook her head. Nothing, General. We've tried everything, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, universal constants, even music. They're not interested in talking. The general wasn't surprised. In her 30 years of military service, she had learned to recognize the look of someone who had already decided to fight. These aliens had that look. What about the weapon analysis? Do we know what we're facing? Colonel Harrison brought up detailed scans of the alien vessels. Their ships appear to be using some form of energy shielding technology. Our scientists estimate that conventional weapons will be largely ineffective. However, Doctor's team has identified potential vulnerabilities. Doctor, a quantum physicist who had been working around the clock since the aliens' arrival, stepped forward with obvious exhaustion. Their shields appear to be tuned to deflect energy-based attacks and high-velocity projectiles. However, they may be vulnerable to certain frequencies of electromagnetic pulse weapons and coordinated kinetic bombardment from multiple vectors. In simple terms, Doctor, if we can overload their shields with precisely timed EMP bursts while simultaneously hitting them with enough kinetic projectiles, we might be able to penetrate their defenses. The key is overwhelming them faster than they can adapt. Martinez nodded. It wasn't much, but it was a plan. Implementation timeline. The orbital platforms will be ready in 4 hours. Ground-based systems are online now. We've also modified several of our ICBMs to carry kinetic penetrators instead of nuclear warheads. They'll hit harder and faster than anything in our conventional arsenal. As they spoke, reports continued streaming in from around the globe. The scale of humanity's response was unprecedented in the species' history. Every nation on Earth had put aside their differences to face this common threat. Ancient enemies were sharing technology, resources, and intelligence with a speed that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. General, called Lieutenant from the communications station, we're receiving reports from the International Space Station. They say the alien fleet is beginning to deploy what look like boarding craft. Martinez felt her stomach tighten. Show me. The main display switched to a feed from the ISS, showing the massive alien vessels releasing smaller ships, each one still larger than a human destroyer, that began moving toward strategic targets on Earth's surface. The aliens weren't planning to simply bombard them from orbit. They intended to invade. Time to impact for the first wave. 90 minutes, General. Martinez turned to address the entire command center. Ladies, and this is it. In less than 2 hours, humanity faces its first interplanetary war. Our enemy has superior technology, superior numbers, and superior firepower. They believe we're primitive, weak, and easily conquered. She paused, letting her words sink in. They're about to learn why we're the species that conquered our own planet before we ever left it. They're about to discover what it means to fight an enemy that has spent 5,000 years perfecting the art of war. Admiral Wei was monitoring incoming intelligence reports when something caught his attention. General, we're getting strange readings from several alien vessels. They appear to be scanning our military installations with unprecedented detail. Explain. Dr. Park looked up from her analysis station. It's as if they're trying to understand our tactical doctrines in real time. They're studying how we position our forces, how we communicate, how we coordinate our responses. It's remarkably sophisticated intelligence gathering. Colonel Harrison frowned. That suggests they're not as confident as they appeared initially. They're actually worried enough about our capabilities to study us carefully. Martinez considered this. In her experience, overconfident enemies didn't waste time on detailed reconnaissance. They just attacked. The fact that the aliens were taking time to analyze human military doctrine suggested they had learned to respect their opposition. What have they learned so far? Doctor consulted his analysis. Based on their scanning patterns, they've identified our command structures, communication networks, and primary weapon systems. But General, there's something they haven't found. What? Project Prometheus. Martinez allowed herself a small smile. Project Prometheus was humanity's deepest secret, a rapid response system that had been developed during the Cold War but never deployed. It involved pre-positioned nuclear devices in major urban areas around the world, designed to deny them to invading forces rather than let them fall into enemy hands. But over the past 3 days, the project had been modified. Instead of simply denying territory, the weapons had been reconfigured as coordinated EMP devices designed to overload electronic systems across entire continents simultaneously. Status on Prometheus. All devices are in position and networked. We can trigger coordinated electromagnetic pulses across 70% of Earth's surface within 15 minutes of activation. It won't destroy their ships, but it should disrupt their systems long enough for our kinetic weapons to find their targets. The plan was desperate, dangerous, and would cause massive disruption to human civilization. But it was also the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans had perfected over centuries of fighting each other. General, Lieutenant called out urgently, the first wave of alien landing craft has entered our atmosphere, multiple targets across all continents. They're not just hitting military targets, they're going for civilian population centers. Martinez's expression hardened. Throughout history, there had been rules of war, even among the most brutal conflicts. Targeting civilians was a line that civilized species didn't cross. These aliens had just crossed it. Send a message to all units, she commanded. Rules of engagement are now unlimited. These are not soldiers following the laws of war. These are exterminators. Treat them accordingly. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as orders went out to military units around the globe. But as the first alien landing craft touched down in major cities across Earth, something unexpected began to happen. The aliens had made a critical miscalculation. They had studied human military doctrine, human weapons, and human tactics. But they had failed to understand the most important aspect of human warfare, its people. In New York, as alien soldiers emerged from their landing craft, expecting to face scattered resistance from demoralized civilians, they instead encountered armed citizens fighting from every window, rooftop, and subway tunnel. The city's 8 million residents had turned their home into a fortress. In London, construction workers were using industrial equipment as weapons, while taxi drivers coordinated guerrilla attacks through their radio networks. The city that had survived the Blitz was proving just as stubborn against alien invasion. In Tokyo, the Yakuza had allied with the police to defend their territory. In Moscow, grandmother babushkas were throwing Molotov cocktails from apartment windows. In Beijing, bicycle delivery drivers were carrying messages and supplies through tunnels the aliens couldn't even find. The reports flooding into the command center told the same story from every city. The aliens had prepared to fight human armies, but they hadn't prepared to fight humanity itself. General, Colonel Harrison reported with something approaching awe in his voice, resistance is far more organized and effective than the aliens anticipated. Civilian casualties are lower than expected, and we're inflicting significant losses on their ground forces. Martinez nodded, but she knew this was only the beginning. The aliens still had overwhelming advantages in technology and firepower. Humanity's ground resistance was buying time, but the real battle would be won or lost in space. Status on our orbital assets. The International Space Station has successfully launched 3 kinetic projectiles at the nearest alien capital ship. 2 were intercepted by their point defense systems, but the third got through and caused visible damage to their hull. For the first time since the crisis began, Martinez felt a spark of genuine hope. If human weapons could damage alien ships, then this war wasn't over before it started. Admiral, are your submarine forces in position? Affirmative, General. All 18 nuclear submarines are positioned in deep ocean trenches with communication buoys deployed. They're ready to surface and launch their modified ICBMs on your command. Martinez looked around the command center at the faces of men and women who represented every nation on Earth. 3 days ago, these people had been potential enemies. Today, they were humanity's united front against extinction. Doctor, how long until the orbital are fully operational? 30 minutes, General. Admiral, are your forces ready to coordinate a simultaneous strike? Standing by. Martinez took a deep breath. In 30 minutes, humanity would launch its first coordinated military action in space. Not against each other, as they had done for, but against a common enemy that threatened their very existence. The aliens thought they were conquering a primitive species. They were about to learn that they had declared war on the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. All units, Martinez announced into her command headset, prepare for Operation Earthbound Fury. We're going to show these aliens what happens when they threaten our home. Admiral stared at the tactical displays in growing disbelief as reports flooded in from his ground forces across Earth's surface. What should have been a simple pacification operation was turning into something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. Report, he commanded, his 4 eyes blazing with fury. Sub-admiral's usually composed demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. Lord Admiral, our ground forces are encountering resistance levels far exceeding our projections. The humans are not fighting like a conquered species. Elaborate. Commander Al pulled up battlefield feeds from multiple cities simultaneously. In what they call New York City, our forces have been unable to secure even a single city block. The humans have turned their entire urban environment into a weapon. They're using their primitive automobiles as guided missiles, their construction equipment as artillery, and their communication networks to coordinate attacks with military precision. Watch the feeds with mounting horror. His elite warriors, each one a product of centuries of genetic optimization and combat training, were being harassed and injured by beings that should have cowered before their superior strength and technology. Impossible, show me the casualties. The numbers that appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. In just 6 hours of ground operations, his forces had suffered more casualties than they typically experienced in months of conventional conquest. And these weren't deaths from enemy military forces. They were being killed by civilians using improvised weapons and tactics. How are primitives causing such losses to our forces? Consulted his analysis reports. Lord Admiral, it appears we fundamentally misunderstood this species' nature. They don't distinguish between military and civilian populations during wartime. Their entire society transforms into a military organization when threatened. On the main display, a feed from London showed an elderly human female throwing a flaming bottle at one of their armored vehicles. The improvised weapon, which their computers identified as a Molotov cocktail, somehow managed to find a gap in the vehicle's armor and disable it completely. An elderly non-combatant just destroyed one of our assault vehicles, Al reported with obvious bewilderment. With fire and fermented beverages. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature controls. In all his conquests, civilian populations had either fled or submitted immediately when faced with superior military force. The idea that grandmothers would pick up weapons against trained soldiers was so alien to his experience that he couldn't process it. What about their military response? Surely their organized forces have been neutralized. Negative, Lord Admiral. Their military units have proven remarkably adaptive. They're using unconventional tactics that our strategic computers cannot predict or counter. A new feed showed human soldiers in something called the Swiss Alps. Instead of engaging in direct combat, they had collapsed entire mountainsides onto forces, burying advanced alien technology under millions of tons of rock and snow. Another display revealed human naval forces that had deliberately sunk their own ships in strategic locations, creating obstacles that prevented alien vessels from reaching important ports. The humans were literally destroying their own infrastructure to deny it to the enemy. They're implementing a scorched earth strategy, explained. Rather than allow us to capture their resources intact, they're destroying anything of value before we can secure it. His mandibles clicked nervously. Scorched earth tactics were typically used by desperate species facing extinction. But the humans weren't acting desperate. They were acting methodical, as if this was a standard military doctrine they had practiced for centuries. Lord Admiral, Commander Al interrupted, we're detecting massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. Their primitive installations appear to be coming online. Before could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. The main display showed multiple projectiles streaking up from Earth's surface at velocities that shouldn't have been possible with human technology. Evasive maneuvers, he commanded, but it was too late. The first kinetic projectile struck the destroyer of worlds with tremendous force. The ship's energy shields held, but warning lights flashed across the bridge as power systems strained to absorb the impact. Damage report. Shields down to 70%, Lord Admiral. The projectile was a solid tungsten rod accelerated to 12% of light speed. Our computers didn't calculate that these primitives could achieve such velocities. More impacts followed as the human orbital platforms opened fire. Each strike was precisely targeted, hitting weak points in ship designs that shouldn't have been visible to primitive sensors. How are they targeting our vulnerable systems so accurately? Demanded. Unknown, Lord Admiral, but their targeting solutions are becoming more precise with each salvo. It's as if they're learning our weaknesses in real time. The Admiral stared at the tactical display as more human weapons came online. What had started as a simple conquest was rapidly becoming a real battle, something the Empire hadn't experienced in decades. Sir, reported the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the human planet. It appears to be from their military command. Put it through. The image that appeared on screen showed a human female in military uniform. Her expression was cold and determined, lacking any trace of the fear or desperation had expected to see. I am General Sarah Martinez, speaking for the United Earth Defense Command, the human said with calm authority. You have invaded our world, targeted our civilians, and threatened our species with extinction. This is our response. The transmission ended, and immediately every screen on the bridge erupted with warnings. Across Earth's surface, coordinated electromagnetic pulses were detonating simultaneously, creating a cascade effect that reached into space itself. All systems compromised, reported as backup power kicked in throughout the ship. The electromagnetic interference is disrupting our sensors, communications, and targeting systems. At that exact moment, as ships struggled with system failures, humanity launched its coordinated counterattack. Nuclear submarines surfaced simultaneously across Earth's oceans, firing modified ICBMs that had been retrofitted with kinetic penetrators instead of warheads. The space-based platforms, freed from the interference of alien jamming systems, opened fire with devastating precision. Each shot was timed to hit already weakened targets at the exact moment their shields were cycling back online. Most surprisingly, civilian space assets that the aliens had dismissed as irrelevant suddenly revealed themselves as weapons. Communication, satellites deployed hidden missile systems. The International Space Station launched kinetic projectiles from concealed launchers. Even weather satellites began transmitting jamming signals that disrupted alien coordination. Lord Admiral, Al reported with growing alarm, we're losing ships. The humans have somehow turned their entire planet into a coordinated weapons system. Watched in horror as the tactical display showed vessels throughout the fleet taking damage from precisely coordinated attacks. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were fighting smart, using every advantage they could create or exploit. How many ships have we lost? 47 destroyed, another 123 with significant damage. Lord Admiral, their attack patterns suggest military thinking far more sophisticated than our initial assessments indicated. The Admiral's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the human tactics. These weren't the desperate flailings of a primitive species facing extinction. This was coordinated, planned, and executed with a precision that spoke of centuries of military evolution. Analysis of their strategic doctrine. Worked frantically at his station. Lord Admiral, our computers have identified over 300 distinct military stratagems in use by human forces. They appear to have detailed knowledge of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, siege defense, and something they call total war doctrine. Total war? According to their historical databases, it's a concept where an entire civilization transforms itself into a military organization. Every resource, every citizen, every piece of infrastructure becomes part of the war effort. It's remarkably efficient. Felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: uncertainty. The Empire had conquered thousands of worlds, but they had always faced either primitive species that submitted quickly or advanced civilizations that fought conventional wars. They had never encountered a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of warfare against its own kind. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving another transmission from Earth. Multiple sources this time." The main display filled with images from across the human planet. Military leaders, political figures, and even civilians were speaking directly to the alien fleet. But instead of the surrender expected, each message carried the same theme. "This is Prime Minister Harrison of the United Kingdom. We have survived Viking raids, Norman conquest, Napoleon, and the Blitz. We will survive you." "This is President of the People's Republic of China. Our nation has endured for 5,000 years through countless invasions. We are still here." "This is Chancellor of Germany. We know what it means to rebuild from ashes. We are prepared to do so again." Each message was followed by images of human military preparations, that everything the computers had predicted. Instead of panicking, the humans were working with mechanical efficiency to transform their entire civilization into a war machine. Their factories were producing weapons around the clock. Their scientists were reverse engineering captured technology. Their military forces were implementing tactics that seemed to anticipate alien responses before they were made. "Lord Admiral," said quietly, "I believe we may have made an error in our initial assessment." Turned his 4 eyes toward his subordinate. "Explain." "We assumed this species was primitive because they lacked advanced technology. But Lord Admiral, I don't think they're primitive. I think they're something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Pulled up a comprehensive analysis of human history. "According to our data, this species has been in a state of continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. They've never had galactic peace because they've never had planetary peace. They've been fighting each other with increasing sophistication for over 5,000 years." The implications hit like a physical blow. "You mean?" "Yes, Lord Admiral, we haven't invaded a primitive world. We've invaded a planet of career soldiers who have spent 5 practicing war against each other. And now, for the first time in their history, they have a common enemy." As if to emphasize this point, the tactical display showed something that chilled to his core. Human military units that had been enemies just days before were now coordinating their attacks with flawless precision. Ancient rivals were sharing technology and resources. Nationalist armies were working together as if they had trained for this moment their entire lives. The humans hadn't just united to face a common threat. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. They had become humanity at war. And Admiral was beginning to realize that the Empire might have just picked a fight with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. 3 weeks after the initial invasion, General Martinez stood in the expanded command center that now stretched across 5 underground levels beneath the Pentagon. The war room buzzed with activity as representatives from every nation on Earth coordinated humanity's response to what had become the largest military engagement in galactic history. "Status report on Operation Prometheus," she demanded as she approached the central holographic display showing Earth's orbital space. Doctor, now bearing the exhausted look of someone who had slept maybe 6 hours in the past week, looked up from his calculations. "General, the coordinated EMP strategy has exceeded all expectations. We've successfully disrupted alien operations on 17 separate occasions. Their ships are adapting, but each adaptation takes time we can exploit." Colonel Harrison pointed to tactical displays showing the current state of the battle. "Our losses have been significant, but sustainable. More importantly, we're inflicting casualties on the alien forces at a rate their command structure clearly didn't anticipate." The numbers told an extraordinary story. Humanity had lost over 2 million soldiers and civilians, but they had destroyed nearly 300 alien vessels and eliminated an estimated 50,000 enemy ground troops. For a species that supposedly possessed overwhelming technological superiority, The Empire was bleeding far more than anyone had expected. Admiral Wei, coordinating naval operations from his position at the tactical table, looked up with a mixture of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Our submarine forces have successfully prevented alien control of any major ocean. They can't establish supply lines when they don't know where our next attack will come from. Martinez nodded. The submarine strategy had proven particularly effective. Human nuclear submarines, designed to remain hidden from other humans who knew their capabilities, were proving nearly invisible to alien sensors calibrated for different detection methods. What about technological advancement? Are we making progress reverse engineering their equipment? Dr. Elizabeth Park, now serving as head of the hastily assembled Alien Technology Analysis Division, smiled for the first time in weeks. General, we've achieved breakthroughs that our scientists describe as impossible. We've successfully replicated their energy shielding technology and are implementing it on our own vessels. Timeline for deployment. The first human vessels equipped with derived technology will launch within 72 hours. They won't match alien capabilities, but they'll survive long enough to do significant damage. Martinez felt a surge of pride in her species. Humanity had always excelled at adaptation, but what they were achieving now bordered on miraculous. 3 weeks ago, humans had barely mastered interplanetary travel. Today, they were building starships that could challenge an empire that had ruled the galaxy for. General, Lieutenant called from the communications station, we're receiving an urgent transmission from the Lunar Defense Station. They report a massive alien fleet approaching from beyond Pluto. The main display shifted to show long-range sensor data from humanity's hastily constructed lunar installations. What they saw made everyone in the command center fall silent. Over 5,000 alien vessels were approaching the solar system in perfect formation. Each ship was larger than the ones they had been fighting, and energy readings suggested weapons systems far more powerful than anything they had encountered. Analysis, Martinez commanded, though she already knew the answer would be grim. Doctor worked frantically at his calculations. General, this appears to be a full battle fleet rather than the expeditionary force we've been fighting. Energy signatures suggest they possess planetary bombardment capabilities. Admiral Wei studied the tactical implications. If they're willing to destroy Earth's biosphere, there's no defense against this level of firepower. Martinez considered their options. Humanity had proven they could fight the Empire on relatively equal terms when the aliens were constrained by their desire to capture Earth intact. But if the invaders decided to simply annihilate the planet from space? Time to arrival. 6 days, General. Martinez turned to address the entire command center. Ladies, it appears our enemy has decided to escalate this conflict beyond anything we've prepared for. They're no longer interested in conquering Earth. They want to destroy it. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Park clearing her throat. General, there might be another option. Explain. We've been analyzing captured communication equipment. Their command structure appears to be highly centralized, with all major decisions flowing through a single flagship. If we could disable or destroy their command vessel. Colonel Harrison caught on immediately. The entire fleet would lose coordination, classical decapitation strategy. Martinez nodded slowly. It was an enormous risk, but it was better than waiting for planetary annihilation. What would we need? Doctor was already running calculations. A strike force capable of penetrating to the heart of their fleet. It would be essentially a suicide mission. Even with our new technology, the odds of survival would be minimal. How minimals? Less than 5%, General. Martinez looked around the room at the faces of people who had spent the last 3 weeks proving that humanity could achieve the impossible. I need volunteers for a mission that will almost certainly result in death but might save our species. Any takers? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every person in the command center stepped forward, followed by reports flooding in from military units around the globe. Within an hour, they had over 10 million volunteers for a mission that could only accommodate perhaps 1,000 people. But as humanity prepared for what might be its final stand, something unexpected was happening aboard the flagship approaching Earth. Admiral stood in his private quarters, staring at reports that contradicted everything he thought he knew about warfare. His mandibles clicked nervously as he reviewed casualty figures, technological assessments, and strategic analyses that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The humans were not just resisting, they were evolving. Their tactics were becoming more sophisticated daily. Their technology was advancing at a pace that physical laws. Most troubling of all, they were displaying a level of coordination and determination that his military scientists insisted was theoretically impossible for any species. A soft chime indicated that Supreme Admiral, commander of the Imperial Fleet, was requesting a private communication. Accepted the call with a mixture of relief and dread. The holographic image of his superior materialized in the room, all 9 feet of perfectly evolved military excellence, his scales bearing the battle scars of campaigns across the galaxy. Admiral's voice carried the authority of someone who had never experienced defeat. Your reports regarding this human species are troubling. Supreme Admiral, I must respectfully submit that our initial assessment of this species was fundamentally flawed. Explain. Activated displays showing human military capabilities. They are not a primitive species, sir. They are something our strategists have never encountered. They appear to have evolved specifically for warfare. Impossible. Our profiles indicate they evolved from prey animals. With respect, Supreme Admiral, I believe our profiles are incorrect. These humans show every characteristic of apex predators. More than that, they show characteristics of a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history in competition with itself. His expression grew stern. You're suggesting that an entire species has evolved military capabilities. I'm suggesting something far worse than that, sir. I believe we've encountered a species that has spent thousands of years practicing total warfare against enemies exactly like themselves. They know every strategy we might employ because they've already used it against each other. The Supreme Admiral was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data. What are your recommendations? Felt his career ending with his next words, but he had no choice. Supreme Admiral, I recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. These humans represent a threat not just to our expeditionary forces, but potentially to the Empire itself. Withdrawal from primitives armed with kinetic weapons. Sir, they're no longer using just kinetic weapons. They've successfully reverse-engineered our technology and are implementing improvements we hadn't considered. Their rate of technological advancement is unprecedented in galactic history. His eyes narrowed. You're recommending we retreat from a single planet. I'm recommending we avoid making the same mistake that every extinct species in this galaxy apparently made. Supreme Admiral, I've reviewed our historical databases. There are references to dozens of advanced civilizations that simply disappeared. No records of what destroyed them, no indication of how they fell, just empty systems with dead worlds. What does that have to do with these humans? Pulled up archaeological data from across space. Sir, we've always assumed those civilizations destroyed themselves or fell to natural disasters. But what if they encountered something like this? What if there's a reason that intelligent life is so rare in this galaxy? The implication hung in the air between them. Studied the data for several minutes before speaking again. Admiral, your theories are disturbing, but they remain theories. I have been ordered by the Imperial Council to resolve this situation permanently. The full battle fleet will arrive at your position in 6 standard days. At that time, we will implement Protocol 7. Felt his blood turn to ice. Protocol 7 was planetary sterilization, the complete destruction of a world's biosphere using concentrated solar bombardment. Supreme Admiral, that level of destruction will eliminate any chance of studying this species further. If I'm correct about their capabilities, we're destroying the greatest military intelligence opportunity in galactic history. If you're correct about their threat level, we're eliminating the greatest danger the Empire has ever faced, replied coldly. Prepare your forces for final bombardment operations. These humans have 6 days to surrender unconditionally, or their species will cease to exist. The communication ended, leaving alone with the horrifying realization that he might be about to witness the destruction of the most remarkable species the galaxy had ever produced. But unknown to either alien commander, humanity was about to demonstrate that even facing extinction, they had one more surprise in store. Dr. Park's linguistic team had finally cracked the communication codes completely. and they had been listening to every transmission between the alien commanders. Humanity now knew exactly what was coming, and they had 6 days to prevent the annihilation of their species. The war was about to enter its final phase. General Martinez stood before the largest military assembly in human history. Representatives from every nation, every branch of service, and every resistance cell on Earth were present either in person or via quantum-encrypted communication links. The weight of their species' survival rested on the next few hours. 6 days ago, we intercepted alien communications confirming what we suspected, she began, her voice carrying to billions of people across the globe. They're not coming to conquer us anymore. They're coming to exterminate us completely. The assembled leaders remained silent, but Martinez could see the determination in their faces. These were not people preparing to surrender. These were people preparing to make their final stand count. Protocol 7 calls for planetary sterilization using concentrated solar bombardment. Complete destruction of Earth's biosphere. No survivors, no prisoners, no second chances. She paused, letting the magnitude sink in. But they've made one critical error. Admiral Wei activated the holographic display showing the approaching fleet. They assume we'll wait passively for our destruction. They assume we'll defend Earth from Earth. They're wrong. The display shifted to show humanity's response, the largest space fleet ever assembled by any species. In 6 days, working around the clock with resources pooled from every nation on Earth, humanity had achieved the impossible. Operation Valkyrie represents everything our species has learned about warfare in 5,000 years of conflict, Martinez continued. We're not going to wait for them to destroy our world. We're going to take the fight to them. Doctor stepped forward to explain the technical aspects. Using captured alien technology combined with our own innovations, we've constructed a fleet of 300 vessels. Each one incorporates energy shielding, human kinetic weapons, and what we're calling fusion ramming capability. Colonel Harrison pulled up tactical diagrams. The strategy is simple in concept, complex in execution. While our main fleet engages their forces directly, a specialized strike force will penetrate to their command vessel and eliminate their supreme admiral. The strike force will be operating under what we're calling Thermopylae Protocol, Martinez explained. 300 volunteers in our most advanced vessels, equipped with the most powerful weapons we can build, tasked with holding off 5,000 enemy ships long enough for one critical shot at their leadership. Dr. Park, coordinating intelligence operations, provided the final piece. Our analysis of their command structure indicates that eliminating their supreme admiral will create a command vacuum lasting approximately 18 hours. That's our window to either negotiate surrender or inflict enough damage to force their withdrawal. The plan was audacious, desperate, and exactly the kind of impossible gambit that humans had been pulling off against overwhelming odds for. But this time, the stakes weren't a city or a nation or even a planet. This time, the stakes were the survival of their entire species. Admiral Wei looked around the room at faces representing every culture, every nation, and every creed on Earth. Ladies, and, for the first time in our history, humanity goes to war as one people. Whatever happens in the next 72 hours, we face it together. The meeting dissolved into frantic final preparations as humanity's united military machine shifted into overdrive. Launch facilities around the globe thundered to life, sending the last components of their improvised fleet into space. Underground factories that had been producing weapons of war for weeks delivered their final products. And in secure facilities across the planet, humanity's greatest scientists put the finishing touches on weapons that would have been considered impossible just months before. But the most crucial element of Operation Valkyrie was taking place in a facility deep beneath the Swiss Alps, where Dr. Elizabeth Park was leading humanity's most closely guarded secret project. "Status report on Project Babel," she requested as she entered the heavily secured laboratory. Doctor looked up from quantum computers that hummed with barely contained energy. "We've successfully cracked their entire communication network, Dr. Park. Not just their military channels, everything. We can monitor their personal communications, their technical manuals, even their entertainment broadcasts." "And the virus?" Dr. Park smiled grimly. "The most sophisticated computer virus ever created. It's designed specifically for computer systems, and it will propagate through their entire fleet within minutes of deployment. It won't destroy their systems, but it will convince every ship that they're under attack by their own allies. The plan was typically human in its cunning. Unable to match alien technology directly, humanity was resorting to psychological warfare on a scale that would have impressed Sun himself. As Earth's defenders made their final preparations, the massive battle fleet approached the outer edge of the solar system. Supreme Admiral stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, watching sensor displays that showed the small blue planet that had become such an unexpected problem. "Admiral," he commanded, "report on human defensive preparations." Reviewed the latest intelligence with growing unease. "Supreme Admiral, their response is unprecedented. Instead of preparing planetary defenses, they appear to be launching their entire remaining military capacity into space." "Show me." The main display revealed something that all previous experience with primitive species. Humanity had somehow assembled a battle fleet numbering in the hundreds of vessels, each one incorporating technology that shouldn't have been possible for their industrial base to produce. Analysis of their capabilities. Unknown, Supreme Admiral. Their vessels incorporate our own energy shielding technology, but they appear to have made modifications that our engineers don't recognize. More troubling, they're approaching our fleet rather than defending their planet. Studied the tactical display with the experience of someone who had fought battles across the galaxy. They're planning a direct engagement. Remarkable. Most species attempt negotiation or defensive strategies when facing overwhelming force. "Sir, there's something else. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from their fleet. Our computers cannot identify the power sources they're using." Before the Supreme Admiral could respond, proximity alarms began sounding across the bridge. The human fleet had engaged their faster-than-light systems, technology they supposedly didn't possess, and were now approaching at speeds that made tactical response almost impossible. "All ships battle stations," commanded. "Target their lead vessels and prepare for." His orders were cut off as every display on the bridge suddenly went dark, followed immediately by emergency lighting as backup systems activated. Throughout the fleet, the same scene was playing out as Dr. Park's virus propagated through their communication networks. "Computer systems compromised," reported the tactical officer. "We're receiving reports of complete system failures across the fleet." But the virus hadn't just disabled their systems. It had replaced them with carefully crafted false information. Every ship was now receiving sensor data indicating that their fellow vessels were targeting them with weapons systems. To each ship's computers, it appeared that their own allies had turned against them. Chaos erupted throughout the alien fleet as ships began taking evasive action from threats that existed only in their compromised computer systems. Some vessels opened fire on their neighbors, believing they were under attack. Others shut down their weapons entirely, trying to avoid triggering what they perceived as a massive fleet rebellion. At that exact moment, humanity's united fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel and opened fire with weapons that combined alien energy technology with human tactical doctrine. The results were devastating. Ships designed to fight conventional battles found themselves facing coordinated attacks from vessels that fought like humans, unpredictably, aggressively, and with a willingness to sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage. Human captains rammed their ships into alien vessels, detonating fusion reactors in coordinated strikes that tore holes in the enemy formation. Others used their vessels as kinetic projectiles, accelerating to maximum speed before ejecting their crews in escape pods and turning their ships into guided missiles. Supreme Admiral watched in horror as his overwhelming numerical advantage became meaningless in the chaos of confused communications and suicidal human tactics. "Restore communications. Get me tactical control of this fleet." But even as his technicians worked frantically to purge the virus from their systems, the human strike force was executing the most audacious military operation in galactic history. 300 human vessels, led by volunteers who knew they would never see Earth again, penetrated to the heart of the formation with one objective: eliminate the enemy command structure. General Martinez, commanding the strike force from the lead vessel Indomitable, watched as alien ships fell away around them. Her small fleet was taking horrific casualties, But they were achieving something that should have been impossible. They were punching through the defenses of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Target acquired," reported her weapons officer. "The Eternal Dominion is within range. All remaining vessels coordinate final strike. Make it count." The 18 surviving ships of humanity's strike force opened fire simultaneously with every weapon they possessed. Kinetic projectiles, fusion torpedoes, directed energy weapons, and experimental devices based on captured alien technology all converged on the flagship. The Eternal Dominion's shields held for almost 3 seconds before collapsing under the concentrated assault. The massive vessel, designed to command fleets across galactic distances, was torn apart by weapons built in factories that hadn't existed a month earlier. Supreme Admiral's last coherent thought, as his ship disintegrated around him, was a recognition of what the Empire had truly encountered. These humans weren't primitives who had stumbled onto advanced technology. They were apex predators who had finally found prey worthy of their skills. With their command structure eliminated and their communication systems compromised, the fleet found itself facing an enemy that had spent 5,000 years learning how to exploit exactly this kind of chaos. Human ships, outnumbered 15 to 1, began implementing tactics that turned confusion into strategic advantage. Some alien vessels, isolated and unable to coordinate with their fellows, found themselves surrounded by human ships that had somehow anticipated their movements. Others discovered that their weapons were targeting friendly vessels due to continued computer virus effects. Still others simply fled, unable to distinguish between real threats and false sensor data. Admiral, commanding the survivors from a secondary vessel, managed to restore partial communications just in time to witness the complete collapse of tactical superiority. His screens showed human ships moving through the alien formation like predators through a flock of confused prey. "All remaining vessels," he transmitted on emergency frequencies, "immediate withdrawal to jump distance. Repeat, immediate withdrawal. This engagement is terminated." As the fleet retreated in disorder, General Martinez stood on the bridge of her damaged vessel, watching sensors that showed the impossible. Humanity had just defeated the most powerful military force in galactic history, not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through superior understanding of warfare itself. Dr. Park's voice crackled through the communication system from Earth. "General, we're detecting retreat signatures from all remaining alien vessels. They're leaving the system." Martinez allowed herself a moment of exhausted satisfaction. Confirmed, the threat to Earth is eliminated. But even as humanity celebrated its impossible victory, the implications of what they had achieved were spreading across the galaxy. Word of the Empire's defeat was reaching civilizations that had hidden in fear for, cowering from the alien overlords who had dominated known space for centuries. For the first time in galactic history, someone had stood up to the Empire and won. Admiral, now the highest-ranking survivor of the forces, sat in his damaged ship as it limped toward Imperial space. He was composing a report that he knew would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "Imperial Command," he transmitted. "This is Admiral with emergency priority communication. The expedition to System Sol 3 has failed. Recommend immediate implementation of non-engagement protocols for all contact with the species designated humans." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Additional recommendation: formal diplomatic contact should be established immediately. This species represents either the greatest threat or the greatest ally the Empire will ever encounter." As his transmission sped toward the heart of space, Earth's defenders began the long process of rebuilding their world. But they were no longer the isolated species that had first detected alien signals just months before. They were now the species that had declared war on the galaxy's greatest empire and won. They were the humans who had reminded the universe that some prey animals are actually apex predators that just haven't found the right hunting ground yet. And across the galaxy, civilizations that had cowered in submission for centuries began to whisper a new word: hope. The age of human expansion was about to begin.